Hello and welcome to Wikia's Fan versus Critic series. I'm Matt Ashby, editor-in-chief of RottenTomatoes.com, representing the critical community, and representing the fans is Greater Good. Greater Good, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be on.
All right, today we're going to be talking about episode 9 of season 4 of Game of Thrones, which is The Watchers on the Wall. A lot of things happen in this episode, but they all happened at Castle Black. It's a big battle scene, and we saw a lot of interesting stuff going on, a lot of interesting moments in this battle. Greater Good, what do you think, what was your favorite moment with one of the characters from this particular episode?
I'd say my favorite moment overall was the scene in which Ygritte dies, because her mission throughout this whole season has been to find Jon and kill him, out of vengeance for abandoning her at the end of the last season. In the end, she still has those feelings for him, and it prevents her from going through with it, and it ends up costing her dearly in the end.
Yeah, she hesitated, and I was a little surprised based on how angry she was even at the beginning of this episode. I think my favorite moment was a little bit different. It was before the battle, right before when Samwell is talking about how he killed that White Walker because he felt like he had nothing to lose, basically. And after he's clearly found his love for Gilly, he's got something to live for, and he says he doesn't feel like nothing anymore. In fact, I really felt like this was Samwell's episode. He really does a great amount of growth here, and most of his moments were really wrapped up in what I thought was probably kind of his finest episode as a character.
It did feel like he really did develop in this episode, but in a way it was kind of Jon's episode at the same time, because this episode was all about him learning how to be a leader and how to command the Night's Watch.
So in this particular episode, we get this big long battle. We have Mance Rayder's forces testing the defenses of the wall, and it ends up being a very vicious fight. We see a lot of characters kind of step up and fight in a way that we hadn't seen before. Greater Good, I want to see who you thought probably acquitted themselves maybe most surprisingly in this battle. Who did you not expect to do so well and actually turned out to be a much better fighter than you really thought?
Well, I suppose I'd probably go with Jon, because we see him going up against Dur, who's one of the most feared wildlings, in vicious cannibal, and he manages to come out on top in the end. So I think that shows how much he's really honed himself as a fighter.
I think that Jon really did show himself. I will say I also was shocked by how much Sir Alistair really stepped up and showed himself to be a pretty powerful warrior and did a pretty good job motivating his troops. We've seen him for a lot of this episode kind of be this martinet type character, rules with an iron fist and no one really likes him. But, when it comes down to the battle, I thought he did a decent job motivating his troops. And when he, stepped into the fray himself, especially, he has that really big battle with Tormund Giantsbane. That was pretty impressive, and it was more than I would have expected to see out of him. So I think he did a pretty good job too. All right, so one of the things I wanted to bring up, this is a relatively unique episode. We haven't had very many episodes that take place entirely in one location, and I think there's some dissension as to whether or not that really works for an episode. I don't think it was one of the best episodes. I do think that we had a lot of storylines converging, and a lot of interesting things happened, but I found myself getting impatient to kind of see some of the other more interesting stories happening. I felt like, as great as this battle was...
I'm sorry, we got some major... Sorry, no, I don't agree there. I think that episodes like this and Blackwater, because they focus more on one storyline, they tend to have a more focused story overall, because in a lot of episodes, when it covers multiple storylines in the space of an hour, I feel that it does tend to feel a bit scattered at times.
Well, Greater Good, I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree there. But I want to thank you for joining us today. I think we've talked a lot about an episode that is the penultimate episode. We're going to have some really interesting things happening in the next episode. So everybody watching, please make sure to join us next week when we talk about the final episode of Season 4 of Game of Thrones. Greater Good, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt.
And that's it for this week's. Once again, I'm Matt Ashby for RottenTomatoes.com. This has been Wikia's Fan versus Critic, and join us again for the last episode of Season 4. We're going to be covering for Game of Thrones next week. We'll see you then.